with your eyes, which in their weariness barely free themselves from the worn-out threshold. You lift very slowly one black tree and place it against the sky, slender, alone, and you have made the world, and it is huge and like a word which grows ripe in silence, and as your will seizes on its meaning, tenderly your eyes let it go.
Second or third grade, I had an art teacher named Rodger in Waterloo, Iowa, and he showed us probably a slide back then of Vincent van Gogh's Wildflowers. And it looked so fresh and so alive. And then he told us it was made in the 1870s. And at that point I knew that what art was about was immortality. I was never the best draftsman in my class, not the best student by far. But I knew that it was a chance for immortality, and I wanted to give it that shot. That somehow or another, when you make a piece of art, it's like putting a note in a bottle and throwing it in the ocean of time. And I wanted to make that gamble. I wanted to gamble on the ocean of time. Ladies and gentlemen, on line 2 we have a Carlita. It says here she's from Yuma, Arizona. Carlita, what is your question?
What's wrong with you?
Well, Carlita, I'm not sure about the appropriateness of the question, but having asked it, I would say offhand some sort of obsessive compulsive disorder and probably borderline schizophrenia. But let's go ahead and go to our sponsors so I can talk to the call screener about all this.
In the human race, is there room for humans? At a grim moment in civilization, can the still small voice of the individual count for anything? If only the powerful can effect change, can anyone propose that power also hides among and within the powerless? Most art, no matter how vacuous or self-indulgent, affords its makers and its witnesses glimpses of a liberated mindset, of voices self-empowered and empowered by models, artistic and otherwise, of affirmation and insight. Most artists are unaware of their art's contagious freedom. At best, they trust in the condition of art in general, not the strength of their own work, to exemplify its self-possession art can bring to consciousness. Scott Jones, for one, is acutely aware of art's exemplary energy. His charged images centered around the human figure or visage seem on the verge of dramatic inaction, but deliberately avoid narrative, although the trappings of narrative, the props, the setups, the mise en scène, can be found throughout his oeuvre. Jones produces plenty of portraiture, but little of it portrays individuals. Rather, Jones favors contemporary role players, anonymous or typecast figures, who figure less as protagonists than as representatives of modern life and of those forced to live it.
Dunning-Kruger is my greatest fear. Greatest fear. It's like in art, you're susceptible to that. Most people don't know enough about it to know how bad they are at it. And that might be me. Might be.
Next, I said, compare the effect of education and the lack of it on our nature to an experience like this. Imagine human beings living in an underground cave-like dwelling with an entrance a long way up, which is both open to the light and as wide as the cave itself. They've been there since childhood, fixed in the same place, with their necks and legs fettered, able only to see in front of them, because their bonds prevent them from turning their heads around. Light is provided by a fire burning far above and behind them. Also behind them, but on higher ground, there is a path stretching between them and the fire. Imagine that along this path a low wall has been built, like the screen in front of puppeteers, above which they show their puppets. I'm imagining it. Then also imagine there are people along the wall carrying all kinds of artifacts that project above it. Statues of people and other animals made out of stone, wood, and every material. And, as you'd expect, some of the carriers are talking, some are silent. It's a strange image you're describing, and strange prisoners. They're like us. Do you suppose that, first of all, that these prisoners see anything of themselves and one another besides the shadows that the fire casts on the wall in front of them? How could they if they have had to keep their heads motionless throughout life? What about the things being carried along the wall? Isn't the same true of them? Of course. If they could talk to one another, don't you think they suppose that the names they used applied to the things they see passing before them? They'd have to. And what if their prison also had an echo from the wall which is facing them? Don't you think they'd believe that the shadows passing in front of them were talking whenever one of the carriers passing along the wall was doing so? I certainly do. Then the prisoners would in every way believe that the truth is nothing other than the shadows of those artifacts. They must surely believe that. Consider then what being released from their bonds and cured of their ignorance would naturally be like if something like this came to pass. When one of them was freed and suddenly compelled to stand up, turn his head, walk, and look up toward the light, he'd be pained and dazzled and unable to see things whose shadows he'd seen before. What do you think he'd say if we told him that what he'd seen before was inconsequential? But now, because he's a bit closer to things that are and is turned toward things that are more, he sees more correctly. Or, to put it another way, if we point to each of the things passing by, asked him what each of them is, and compelled him to answer, don't you think that he'd be at a loss, and that he'd believe that the things he saw earlier were truer than the ones he was now being shown? Much truer. And if someone compelled him to look at the light itself, wouldn't his eyes hurt, and wouldn't he turn around and flee toward the things he's able to see, believing that they're really clearer than the ones he's being shown? He would. And if someone dragged him away from there by force up the rough, steep path and didn't let him go until they had dragged him into the sunlight, wouldn't he be pained and irritated at being treated that way? And when he came into the light and the sun filled his eyes, wouldn't he be unable to see a single one of the things now said to be true? He would be unable to see them, at least at first. I suppose, then, that he'd need time to get adjusted before he could see things in the world above. At first, he'd see shadows most easily, then images of men and other things in water, then the things themselves. Of these, he'd be able to study the things in the sky and the sky itself more easily at night, looking at the light of the stars and the moon, then during the day, looking at the sun and the light of the sun. Of course. Finally, I suppose, he'd be able to see the sun, not images of it in water or some alien place, but the sun itself in its own place, and be able to study it. Necessarily so. And at this point he would infer and conclude that the sun provides the seasons and the years, governs everything in the visible world, and is in some way the cause of all things that he used to see. It's clear that would be his next step. And what about when he reminds himself of his first dwelling place, his fellow prisoners, and what passes for wisdom there? Don't you think that he'd count himself happy for the change? Certainly. And if there had been any honors, praises, or prizes among them for the ones who were sharpest at identifying the shadows as they passed, and who best remembered which usually came earlier, which later, and which simultaneously, and who could thus divine the future, do you think that our man would desire those rewards or envy any of those prisoners who were honored and held power? Instead, wouldn't he feel, like Homer, that he'd much prefer to work the earth as a serf to another, one without possessions, and go through any suffering rather than share their opinions and live as they do? Wouldn't he be pained?
My first serious attempt at painting, I had an uncle that was a student at the University of Northern Iowa. He was studying to be a teacher, and one of his classes was studio art. So at the back of this Kwanzaa hut, he lived in a Kwanzaa hut, and the back of it, he had made a studio. And I remember walking back there, and it's this long thing, and then it's like a temple at the end of it, right? And at this temple, he had this drawing board and these tubes that I'd never seen before. And he handed one to me. I took the lid off, and it was the consistency of toothpaste with this brilliant color. And I'd never seen anything like it, you know? And it grabbed me on that day, and it's held me ever since. So I taught my parents into buying me oil paints, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know there was a difference between oil paint and acrylic. I really needed acrylic, but I had oil. And I made a painting of Jim Taylor from the Green Bay Packers diving into the end zone. And I was really excited to make my green and white and yellow painting. And I got to the back of his jersey where it said his name. And I didn't have a brush that I could, and obsessed with getting the letters on the name correct. And nothing else mattered. It obviously didn't work. It was worse when I tried to do Wilt Chamberlain. That's when it really didn't work. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be an artist. I made a commitment. I'm going to be a realist. So I remember taking a pad of paper and a pencil and going to my backyard and looking at a tree and saying, I'm going to draw that tree. I'm going to draw it realistically. And here's what's realistic. What's the tree made out of? What's its essential parts? It's leaves and branches. So I carefully looked at one leaf and drew it, and then I drew the next leaf and the next. Of course, that was a disaster. It was ridiculous. So, made me think about art in a different way, because at that point I knew that I was not going to be able to look at something and render it the way I was seeing it. I was going to look at something, be stimulated to recreate it on my own terms, and then just see where it ends up. And once I let go of the idea that I was going to be able to copy something from nature and it was going to look like what my retina was recording, once I gave that up, it was okay. And the abstract expressionists were great with that. The idea of improvising and that give and take between you and the canvas, that became the beauty of it, the dance of it.
Jones's sense of occasion, then, is as much pageant as theatre. His people could be, are, anybody. They feel like Americans, the way people were stylized in American representational art of the 1920s and 30s. But they also have an expressionist edge and a surrealist tinge, borrowing, or more accurately inheriting, from European painting between the wars. The hallucinatory nature of so much of Jones's work, and the calamitous turbulence that circulates through it, evokes a tempestuous century, but also reminds us that we have had little peace to enjoy since.
Do you like explaining your work?
No, absolutely not. The work is the talking. No, because people ask me, tell me more about this.
Censurado por motivos legales. Archivo censurado por motivos legales.
What's your thoughts? What are you? I'm as full of shit as anybody else.
And we've talked about that before, how Scott Jones doesn't sit down and say like, okay, now I'm going to paint this painting of my wife. It's something that's kind of channeled, for lack of better words.
No, I think that's accurate.
And it's something that as artists we can kind of grasp and try to grab and get it out of the ether into the physical.
Your term is perfect, I think.
Do you see the artistic process as more of an act of discovery or creation? How does this influence your approach to your work?
It's absolutely discovery. I don't. Creation is one of those words I really don't know the definition of. I don't know what it means to be creative. I know what it means to juxtapose. Okay, so when you bake a cake, you follow a recipe, flour, sugar. I don't bake, so I don't know. Did you create the cake? Is baking an act of creation? No, it's an arrangement. And then that arrangement is tempered by heat. I didn't make anything. I arranged things and then it became something else. So that's the act of creation to me. There's nothing new under the sun. As much as I hate that cliche, I love that cliche. There is nothing new under the sun.
Yeah, it's comforting on some level.
Very comforting.
Being treated that way. And when he came into the light and the sun fell in his eyes, wouldn't he be unable to see a single one of the things now said to be true? He would be unable to see them, at least at first. I suppose then that he'd need time to get adjusted before he could see things in the world above. At first he'd see shadows most easily, then images of men and other things in water, then the things themselves. Of these, he'd be able to study the things in the sky and the sky itself more easily at night, looking at the light of the stars and the moon, than during the day, looking at the sun and the light of the sun. Of course, finally I suppose he'd be able to see the sun, not images of it in the water or some alien place, but the sun itself in its own place, and be able to study it, necessarily so. And at this point, he would infer and conclude that the sun provides the season and the years, governs everything in the visible world, and in some way, and is in some way the cause of all things that he used to see. It's clear that would be his next step. What about when he reminds himself of his first dwelling place, his fellow prisoners, and what passed for wisdom there? Don't you think that he'd count himself happy for the change? And pity the others? Certainly.
And if there had been any honors, praises, or prizes among them for the one who was sharpest at identifying the shadows as they passed by, and who best remembered which usually came earlier, which later, and which simultaneously, and who could thus divine the future, do you think that our man would desire these rewards, or envy those among the prisoners who were honored and held power? Instead, wouldn't he feel with Homer that he'd much prefer to work the earth as a serf to another, one without possessions, and to go through any suffering, rather than share their opinions and live as they do? I suppose he would rather suffer anything than to live like that. Consider this too. If this man went down into the cave again and sat down in the same seat, wouldn't his eyes, coming suddenly out of the sun like that, be filled with darkness? It certainly would. And before his eyes had recovered and the adjustment would not be quit, his vision was still dim, while his vision was still dim. And before his eyes had recovered and the adjustment would not be quit, while his vision was still dim, if he had to compete again with the perpetual prisoners in recognizing the shadows, wouldn't he invite ridicule? Wouldn't it be said of him that he'd returned from his upward journey with his eyesight ruined, and that it isn't worthwhile to even try to travel upward? And as for anyone who tried to free them and lead them upward, if they could somehow get their hands on him, wouldn't they kill him? They certainly would. This whole image, Glover, must be fitted together with what we said before. The visible realm should be likened to the prison dwelling, and the light of the fire inside it to the power of the sun. And if you interpret the upward journey and the study of things above as the upward journey of the soul into the intelligible realm, you'll grasp what I hope to convey, since that is what you wanted to hear about. Whether it's true or not, only the God knows. But this is how I see it. In the knowledgeable realm, the form of the good is the last thing to be seen, and it is reached only with difficulty. Once one has seen it, however, one must conclude that it is the cause of all that is correct and beautiful in anything, that it produces both life and its source in the visible realm, and that in the intelligible realm it controls and provides truth and understanding, so that anyone who acts sensibly in private or public must see it. I have the same thought, at least as far as I am able. Come then, share with me this thought also. It isn't surprising that the ones who get to this point are unwilling to occupy themselves with human affairs, and that their souls are always pressing upwards, eager to spend their time above. For, after all, this is surely what we'd expect, if indeed things fit the image I described it before. It is. What about what happens when someone turns from the divine to study the evils of human life? Do you think it's surprising, since the sight is still dim, that he hasn't yet become accustomed to the darkness around him, that he behaves awkwardly and appears No, it isn't. But anyone with any understanding would remember that their eyes may be confused in two ways and from two causes. Namely, when they've come from the light into the darkness, and when they've come from the darkness into the light. Realizing that the same applies to the soul. When someone sees a soul disturbed and unable to see something, he won't laugh mindlessly, but he'll take into consideration whether it has come from a brighter light and is dim through not yet having become accustomed to the dark, or whether it has come from greater ignorance into greater light and is dazzled by the increased brilliance. Then he'll declare the first soul happy in his experience and life, and he'll pity the latter. But even if he chooses to make fun of it, at least he'd be less ridiculous than if he laughed at a soul that has come from the light above. What you say is very reasonable. If that's true, then here's what we must think about these matters. Education isn't some
A choir and folks dressed up like Eskimos.
If that's true, then here's what we must think about these matters. Education isn't what some people declare it to be, namely, putting knowledge into the souls that lack it, like putting sight into blind eyes. They do say that. But our present discussion, on the other hand, shows that the power to learn is present in everyone's soul, and that the instrument with which each learns is like an eye that cannot be turned around from the darkness to the light without turning the whole body. This instrument cannot be turned around from that which is coming into being without turning the whole soul until it is able to study that which is, and the brightest thing that is, namely, the one we call the good. Isn't that right? Yes. Then education is the craft concerned with doing this very thing, this turning around, and how the soul can most easily and effectively be made to do it. It isn't the craft of putting sight into the soul. Education takes for granted that sight is there, but that it isn't turned the right way, or looking where it ought to look, and it tries to redirect it appropriately. So it seems.
Still, the contemplative moments match the dramatic ones across Jones's work, and sometimes he can calm you down with an explosion or freak you out with a silence. Deeply engaged in philosophy, art history, sociology, and psychology, Jones constantly strives to absorb his and others' observations into pictorial experiences. The image does not illustrate an idea, but rides upon its tenets, and not without questioning those tenets. As Jones makes clearest in his paintings containing sentences, he is not preaching to the converted, himself not least, so much as challenging their conversion.
When do you feel most connected to inspiration? Does it come as an intense, overwhelming feeling, or something subtle that builds over time?
It's very subtle, but it's very pronounced. It's there. It makes itself present, but you have to listen. It's that spiritual person, that still small voice. It's like, wait, what was that? Where did that come from? And then you follow that. And it's very real. It's there. It's like, I'm doing something. I had this job when I was a kid, pouring concrete. There were a lot of co-workers, a lot of people around. And one of the co-workers, we were having beers one time, and we were talking about somebody that wasn't there. And he said, yeah, he said that sometimes you look at Scott and he's not present. Like, I'll just be doing something and just stop. Like, I can feel myself doing it, undoing the dishes. And I don't even know what's going on. It's daydreaming. I'm making a big deal out of a daydream. But essentially, inspiration is just, these paintings are just doodles that got out of control. That's really all they are.
We can regard Jones's process as one of abstraction. We can equally regard it as one of conceptualization or of deconstruction. There is a calculus to Jones's image making, one that lays bare its own contents in order to find meaning at the meeting place of real life and pictorial space, much like the hypnagogic threshold between sleeping and awakening, where reality seems to interweave with improbability. Unlike the surrealists, Jones does not put his faith in the dream, certainly not as a vehicle for narrative or fantasy, but much like them, he does regard dreaming as central to the comprehension of existence.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, back to the phones right now. We have a Solomon from Bangor, Maine. Solomon, what is your question?
It's actually solid.
Okay, thank you, Solomon. What was your question, sir?
Yeah, what's your fucking deal?
Oh, well, as I was saying to the previous caller from Arizona, I'm no clinician, but I would guess delusions of grandeur mixed with just regular old garden variety existential dread. That's probably my deal.
Think so? Well, I'm a clinician.
Oh, really?
And I'll tell you that you seem like you might just be an asshole. It might not be a lot more complicated than that.
Well, I would like to say that professional assessment is very clinical, absolutely. And I wish I could say that was the first time I'd ever heard that assessment by a professional clinician or just a regular person in a restaurant. It kind of just,
But it pops up a lot.
Well, a lot's a tricky word, but it has
okay.
on occasion popped up.
Oh, okay. So you might just be an asshole.
Well, I would definitely entertain that possibility, believe me.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that might be true.
Right.
Thank you for the call, Solomon from Bangor.
When you're creating, do you feel you're in a conversation with the materials themselves, or is it more a guided vision you're trying to realize?
It's always is the wrong word. It is definitely about the materials. I remember when I was teaching art, the principles of design were very important. Harmony, balance, contrast, points of emphasis, things like that. And I'm purely thinking in those terms. I'm not thinking about what am I going to say about my son who's the subject of this painting. Just make it interesting. So it's not a conversation with a narrative or a message or a metaphor. I can't preload a metaphor. I'm discovering the metaphor along with everybody else at the time. Now, I do battle with that in that maybe that means it's not legitimate. You're just moving around and trying to juxtapose things in a way that people find alarming or shocking, and then you've manipulated them to the point where it's like, okay, that was good enough. But I really do feel like there's a type of mythology. There's a type of structure that I'm articulating that I don't fully comprehend, that's on the other side of a screen that I can't see. And little pieces of it are being thrown at me, and I'm trying to assemble it as I go.
How do you navigate the silence or the emptiness of a blank canvas? Do you confront it, surrender to it, or work with it in some other way?
I relish it. Absolutely relish it. I think the idea that I can get be on the same footing with Goya, Vermeer, we all start in the same place. A rectangle with colored mud and brushes. And that idea that I'm in the arena. I just want to be in the arena. I just want to be one of those guys. Well, you're not very good at being one of those guys. Well, guess what? They said that about Cezanne, too. He wasn't one of those guys either. And he didn't have enough brains to quit. That one's easy. Whatever you want it to be. You know, and oh my God, that's such a great question because it's such an exhaust. I mean, critics today still label over that. What is beauty? Is beauty important? What is art? I remember I had a professor at UNI who said there are no living artists in the United States. None. They are not artists. Nobody. Now, this is the 1960s, and that's, of course, it's a ridiculous statement. Some people will tell you that art stopped in ancient Greece, that was the end of art, and that everything that happened after ancient Greece was just a recycling of that. As soon as you point at something and say, that's art, then it's art. Okay, and then you can see it with the banana and the duct tape thing, and there's always one of those coming around. I don't pay any attention to that. It's like, if I point at something and I say it's art, and you're looking at it and you're going, no, that's not art. You had to think of it artfully to arrive at that conclusion. Well, as soon as you think of it critically, it's art. And one of the things I used to tell students all the time, I think maybe the greatest art museum, certainly in town, is Walmart. When you walk into Walmart, all those displays were very carefully designed. There's a design element in everything that's being done there. And if you look at that with the right eyes, it's an amazing installation. And that's what the banana thing's about. It's like the magic is everywhere. It's not just in this art museum. And people have been making fun of the idea of being in an art museum since they've had art museums. And I think that's what that's about. Oh, what is art? Everything, anything. If you're thinking that it's art, your life is art. Now, whether it's good or not, that's a different question. Of course, the other part of Dunning-Kruger is you're an expert at something and you're really good at it, and by that extension, you think everybody can be good at it. Everybody. We have another call. This one is from Tucumcari, New Mexico. It's a fellow by the name of Eli. Eli, did you have a question, a calling question for us? Eli says no, he did not. Obviously, Eli's got the wrong number. Everett, did you have a question?
How do you know when a painting is done?
Well, that's an excellent question, Everett. I appreciate your inquiries, and let me see what I can do with that. Finishing a painting is kind of a tricky situation. There's times when something seems like it may be done, but it just doesn't sit right in my head. I've had paintings hanging up in my house for years, literally, and the reason I hung them up was there was something unresolved about the painting. And I knew if I looked at it long enough, eventually the coin would drop. And usually it does. Sometimes it takes a really long time. But there's a way a painting feels when I look at it that makes me know it's done. And it can come at very unpredictable times. It's just sort of a gut level response to an image when I look at it. When it gets toward a certain point, it feels complete or satisfying. Yeah, I think that's it. Feels satisfactory. Thanks for the question, Everett. Excellent calls. Thank you. Everybody. Like LeBron James might tell you, I don't know if LeBron would tell you this, but I remember when my kid was playing baseball, it was the idea of if you work hard enough, you can do it. It's like, no, dude. Some guys were born 6'3" and able to throw a baseball 97 miles an hour. You don't wake up one morning and decide, in 3 years, I'm gonna throw a baseball 97 miles an hour. I don't understand the nature of talent, but, it's one of those things that when you see it, you know it. I think. Maybe. Yeah.
Where did you get his image, his face?
To me.
And this photo?
That is from a drawing that an artist named Kooning did in the 1940s of just a guy that's like standing, reaching and touching a table. And what I got from that was from him touching it, he's making it real. Like, it's not real until you experience it.
Are you selling that?
Am I selling it? Yeah.